Sorry, we didn't go live. Oh. You're saying error occurred, but we are live.
Yes, it is live.
Okay, I don't know whether, well, I'll have to stop it because it's saying, okay, we are live now. Sorry about that. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the listeners wherever in the world you are. Tonight, we'd like to discuss the problem of Zanu PF and Triple C, particularly focusing on their fanatical supporters. In the cartoon there, we see Mnangagwa being lifted by his supporters, and they are cheering him to the high heavens. This is a cartoon based on a recent recording of Mashingo supporters of Zanu PF clamoring that Mnangagwa should stay in power. I'll just play that clip quickly. That is Mashingo supporters claiming that Mnangagwa should continue ruling. And yet the country has become actually the textbook case of a failed state. And millions of those people who are cheering along, they are living in abject poverty. It doesn't make any sense at all. Good afternoon to you, Benjamin. What's your reaction to this?
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. I believe everybody has a right of association, but at some point, we would expect you to want to realize that, this works and this doesn't work. For the Zanu PF supporters, well, the ones that are carrying ED on that, in that cartoon, and the ones that are singing there, I would believe, or I would say, these are the most incredibly naive individuals. People that actually lack a vision. They talk of vision 2030, but I say they don't even have a vision at all. Surely now with the exposure that we have through the internet, through televisions, through reading, there's so many readings out there. You should be able to see by now how far Zimbabwe has lagged behind. And not even that. If I were to ask you, if you were to ask them the question to say, why do you think we are suffering this much? The first thing that comes to mind, or the first thing they have as an excuse, is blame sanctions, blame the West. So I would say they are the most ignorant, out there. People that are just aimless, people that, they have absolutely no capacity to think for themselves other than what they are told by by ED. Just the same way you find somebody says, let him continue ruling. He is not the only one out there, first of all, that can do the job. So why would you be found singing a song to say, let him continue until when? So I would give them a label, or I would stamp and say incredibly naive. If I would not go to the extent of saying these are foolish or stupid people, but I would say they're incredibly naive, absolutely clueless, and lack of vision and respect for themselves.
Well, I think, in my view, this brings us back to the issue we were talking about the other day of democracy only works when you have got a well-educated, knowledgeable, and diligent electorate. Whether we like it or not, the truth of the matter is the Zimbabwe electorate is far from it. Here are individuals whose allegiance is first and foremost to the party and the leader of that party. And talk of the common interest, the national interest, those things do not mean anything to them. When you look at a situation like, for instance, the fact that the elections, Mnangagwa rigged last year's elections, blatantly rigged those elections. And even the regional body, SADC, the continental body, AU, condemned those elections as flawed and illegal. Those things do not mean anything to these people. Indeed, as far as they are concerned, it produced the result they desired. As long as Zanu PF wins the election, whether they do it by hook or by crook, to them is immaterial. Our party has won. That is the kind of narrow-mindedness that is so tragic. These people it never occurred to them that if Zanu PF leaders can rig the elections, national elections, what is stopping them rigging party elections? And indeed, we've seen that happen. Zanu PF primaries, it's a circus. How the various parties try to outdo each other and rig the process. It's unbelievable. The Zanu PF members themselves are the ones who are marshaled and frog marched to go and vote during the party elections and national elections. Why it has never occurred to them that that cannot be right? Surely they should be respected enough to be trusted with a vote. But no, they have got to be marshaled, and they don't see anything wrong with that. I think that is where the problem is. When you are so focused on what the Greeks called, you are the intellectually inadequate to see the bigger picture. And so you focus on the personality to the point of becoming ridiculous. You fail to see your own personal interest. The whole thing becomes meaningless. Democracy will never work as long as you've got an electorate that is so brainwashed that they cannot see the elephant in the room, that they cannot see the hardship that the elephant is imposing on them. And they are brainwashed to the point where they keep on shouting about trivial matters that they don't even understand. I remember seeing a video clip of somebody being asked, what are these sanctions? And they didn't even know what they are. That is, I think, the tragedy with Zimbabwe. These Zanu PF, even after 44 years, they still have no clue what their own rights are as members of the party. And they do not see the difference between the party and the nation. And that is where the problem is. Can we go on to the opposition, Benjamin?
Okay, so for the opposition supporters, yes, there is a degree of naivety there, but I would also, want to give them leeway by saying, as a people, these past 44 years, we have been through, a lot. Our country was somewhere up there, and then we found ourselves right at the bottom, where life has become so unbearable, such that if somebody comes and says something absolutely meaningless, but there is an element of hope in there, people are quickly to dive in. These are the triple C supporters. Let me say, not the triple C. These are the Chamisa supporters. They will cling on to straws if that would be the only salvation that is there, or what would save them, regardless of whether that thing makes, what that utterance actually makes sense or it doesn't. They would rather hold on to that. That's why you find they say, chamisa chete chete. That's how that's their only hope. They don't see beyond him. They don't see beyond what could be done for us to achieve, or to send Zanu PF packing. They would believe whatever nonsense they are told. So there is similarities between the group, but with these ones, they take Chamisa as the only source of deliverance out of this mess. And they will never question whether whatever he says, is it true? Does it make sense? And even if it doesn't, they will not ask why. So I think that is their problem, where they have taken whatever is being said at face value, without even analyzing, without even scrutinizing, without even asking any questions, and held on to it and pushed that agenda regardless of how nonsensical it sounds.
Well, I think you're more gentle than I am. I think the opposition supporters, they only differ in which party and which leader they support fanatically. Otherwise, intellectually, there is absolutely no difference at all. Indeed, most of the opposition supporters were at one time fanatical Zanu PF supporters. And indeed, some of the opposition themselves, leaders themselves, they were at one time fanatical Zanu PF members who, when they were squeezed out of Zanu PF, went into the opposition, and they've been fighting with the same short-sightedness as we have seen Zanu PF supporters do. One of the most telling thing about the opposition supporters' mental challenge It's their failure to appreciate what is it exactly when they said they wanted democratic change. What are the democratic changes they wanted? You think after 24 years of MDC on the political platform, they would be asking themselves now, MDC is the movement for democratic change. We voted for them to deliver democratic change. What democratic changes have they delivered in 24 years? And failure to ask that pertinent question speaks volumes of the supporters themselves. The fact that last year they were conned into participating in an election process in which they had been warned, not just by people like me, but even some of their own opposition leaders, like Tendai Biti and David Coulter, that participating in an election process that is so flawed and illegal is just madness. And yet, here we are. They participated because Nelson Chamisa assured them that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. When it turns out, and they knew it, and they were warned of that Nelson Chamisa was participating in these elections without even something as basic as a verified voters roll. That is a requirement in Zimbabwe's own electoral act. There should be a verified voters roll at least one calendar month before nomination day. Chamisa and company went and submitted their nomination knowing fully well that there was no verified voters roll. How can you expect elections to be free, fair, and credible without something as basic as a verified voters roll? And how can you, as voters, believe Triple C would win big when there's not even something as basic as a verified voters roll? But they did. So it brings us back to the problem of, can we have a healthy and functioning democracy without an educated, knowledgeable, and diligent electorate? The answer is definitely not. The opposition supporters, and at least 2 million of them, not only supported Chamisa and believed him, they even participated in last year's election because they believed he could win rigged elections. If you are that naive, that gullible, can the country have a meaningful democracy? The answer has got to be no. The task before us, which I think, my view, is what we should be concentrating on, is educating the electorate. Without an educated, knowledgeable, and diligent electorate, we are just wasting our time here. We'll be looking at coming 2028, Mnangagwa will have his brainwashed supporters buy them chicken and chips, and they'll be singing praises of him. And on the other side, Chamisa will have in his new blue bus his own equally brainwashed, brain dead supporters, believing that Chamisa was going to win big, and the only real person who benefit from this whole chaotic situation is Mnangagwa himself. because you rig the elections, win the presidency, win majority in parliament. And you will have the opposition on the hook with a promise of a few gravy train seats. They'll participate, give the process legitimacy. And they can trust the opposition to bring along millions of their equally naive and gullible supporters, believing that participating in flawed elections will bring up the change that they want. And so we're just going round and round in circles here. So my message tonight is that we have got to educate the Zanu PF as much as the opposition supporters. Without that, Zimbabwe will remain a failed state. Thank you very much, Benjamin. I don't know whether you'd want to give your closing remarks.
Yes. In closing, I would say, between the two groups, I find one similarity. One way you find when you want to debate with a Zanu PF supporter, or you say something that is true despite their political affiliation, they would call you a puppet of the West. That is the Zanu PF. That is the answer that they all have. You are either a puppet of the West, you are, they blame sanctions, and that's about it. And you go on to the other side, the followers of Chamisa. If you ask or you question, the logic behind whatever, move or strategy they come up with, you are all of a sudden, you are labeled a Zanu PF member, Varakashi, Faz, and all. So between both, you find that it's very, very difficult to approach them and to have a meaningful debate. One way we all bring out whatever position that we are and why we take it, and then validate it with facts. It is very difficult between both these groups, because I believe they're incredibly naive. They are stubborn at the same time, and it becomes very, very difficult to teach them. But teach them we must. I agree with you. You cannot win them all, but I believe there are people out there that really act because they do not know. But if you do teach them, they will see the sense behind all this at the end of the day. So I agree with you. It's what is left is all for us to try and have have an educated or a reasoning, at least a reasoning, or an electorate that is able to think for themselves. I think that is the minimum requirement for us to towards democracy. That ability. Without that, I do not see us going anywhere. We will be stuck, like you said, going around in circles, like what we have been doing for the past, 40 plus years, which I think, it's about time we make a move as Zimbabwe out of this here, hellhole, and start, the ascendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and those out there were able to join us. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll be able to join us again tomorrow as we continue in this search for how to stop this unbelievable nightmare of rigged elections. 44 years of rigged elections is tragic. But if we're going to repeat that in 2028 and make it 48 years of rigged elections, that will be unforgivable. Particularly when we can see what needs to be done and what should be done to stop it. Thank you again, Benjamin, and good night to everybody.
Thank you. Good night.